Good morning, good afternoon, or wherever you are. It's Matt Coleman, your host from Magnify World, speaking from our Los Angeles studio. We have another guest today that's pioneering what they call spatial augmented reality. His name is Gerhard Kimenkowski, originally from Germany, now living in Perth in Australia and have multiple offices around the world. How are you today?
Yeah, very good actually. So we are getting into spring here in Perth, which is a wonderful time to be in Australia, of course.
Excellent. Yep. End of summer here, of course, but all going well. Hey, thanks for joining us today. I know we've spoken a couple of times since we met, and you've got a really extraordinary technology in the design field for many different industries. And I just coined the term with you, what you call is SAR, spatial augmented reality, which I actually hadn't heard of before. And the company, you know, CADwalk Global has multiple sectors to it, to the market. So can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about, you know, where you're from originally and how you got into this from your other company, Jumbo Vision, originally?
Yeah, of course. I migrated 30 years ago from Germany into Perth, and we started an audiovisual company up here 30 years ago. And we were involved with a lot of oil and gas and mining companies, basically. Then more recently, basically maybe 10 years ago, we did a lot of work for companies like Chevron and Rio Tinto, BHP, people like that. And we moved more and more into the domain of command and control centers. So that means where mission critical rooms are basically designed. And because these rooms are quite expensive, so we then came basically on the idea of we had to find a way to simulate the room in a way before it's being built, and a lot of mistakes are being made. And so CADwalk was born basically. And so from an initial concept basically, then to a product, I guess this is maybe the story we can explore today, actually.
Excellent. So tell me about this, the setup of the company, Gerhard. You've got, you know, branches in Australia, in Melbourne and Adelaide, and obviously Munich. How did you all come to be headquartered in Perth in the end?
Yeah, I think the headquarter actually for CADwalk, even I live in Perth, is in Adelaide. And the reason why we had it in Adelaide, basically, we had what we call our office for the eastern states, basically. We got awarded I think it was in excess of $1 million government grant from the federal government, and that assisted us in helping to establish us in Adelaide and looking after places like Melbourne, Sydney, Queensland, out of Adelaide. Being in Adelaide, basically, we then had a very strong connection with the University of South Australia, and a guy called Bruce Thomas, or Professor Bruce Thomas. And he is sort of, together with me, sort of the brainchild behind the technology of all of that. And even after, I think we met 10 years ago for some defense projects, we are still good friends and like to invest our time and efforts basically into exciting new things, basically. And so that relationship still exists. And therefore the headquarter for CADwalk, the Global Operations Center, basically is out of Adelaide.
Excellent. So how did you piece together the opportunity with the Australian government and their funding? Obviously, there's different areas of the business, from city planning, defence, public transport. When you say mission critical rooms, you know, we want to go into what that is, you know, and that could be a transport centre or management systems for the city. But, you know, way before you even launch that, your technology, you know, is an interesting design tool and, you know, creates the best experience for the management of the city. Tell us a little bit more about how you even connected to the Australian government.
I think as a also like a SME in Australia, there is a lot of support available from federal and state governments, basically. And one of the reasons we ended up in Adelaide was as well that they were very proactive in attracting companies with good ideas after our car industry sort of vanished in Australia. So there were government grants basically when Mitsubishi closed their plant in Adelaide, and we applied for a grant, and yeah, as we know, we got it basically, and we didn't expect that. So with the $1 million, it helped us basically to set up shop in Adelaide. And since this, we have a very strong relationship with federal governments basically. And so they helped us along the way to develop basically CADwalk from an idea concept basically to a prototype, and then to help us to explore possibilities like Germany, for example. So this was match funded from us, of course, but also match funded from the federal government. And I think without the government support and government grants, this sort of ventures can't happen basically. It's very difficult because I don't think that Australia has right now the appetite for startup companies as it might be in the US basically, really.
Yeah. And look, on our program, we usually talk to people in the entertainment industry, and I know that we're going to be showcasing a video during this on how that can be used, but we also talk about health and education and enterprise as well across the whole board of industry sectors here. But something that I've never come across is your research and development. Just give us an example on where you actually start with the design process, whether it's a mission critical room or hospital, etc. Just tell the viewers where do you start and what's the process when you're working with a client?
Yeah, I think the process is in mission critical. Basically, we have a consulting part with that as well. So we first collect information basically, then we build basically a model, and then in CADwalk, before we are not writing big reports or things like that basically. So we get basically our key stakeholders. It might be the medical field, or it might be aged care centers, or it might be hospitals. We bring them into a 3D model, and the 3D model then basically will accommodate us all the way basically in the design process. So from a very basic design to a as-built design and training basically at a later stage as well. So, and the idea is that we don't want to bother people with drawings, because we figured out in the research, and I think that's a well-proven fact, that a lot of people don't have spatial awareness. I think it's around maybe only a small portion of our population has that awareness basically. And a lot of them have become architects. So that means I think architects don't like us all that much, because they've got what we are doing basically in their head anyway. So good on them, I think. So I really respect them. But I think for people who don't have that spatial awareness, I think CADwalk is maybe the closest thing to a built environment. So that means we are building basically a 3D model, and we're projecting it in onto the floor, and then people can come and move things around in a very intuitive environment. And we are on a winner there, because especially in Munich, when we see very adult business people basically coming in and moving the what we call trees around, and get an outcome, and you see the smile on their face, that they look like little kids basically again. And I think that interactive environment basically what we offer, and taking people out of their normal working environment for half a day or a day or something like this. I think the psychology behind this is where R&D has confirmed basically that it is basically that interaction with the model which gets us to buy in basically for the projects, right? So we had in R&D, we had for a year like an industrial psychologist working for us, basically validating that yes, it is basically not technology so much, it is a process basically. So to make this unique environment basically available for people. So yeah, so the R&D on this is basically has been in human factors. So that means before we built the 3D model, which is based on the technology, of course, we want to understand the task at hand. So it might be bringing a hospital in a lift or doing things like that, basically. And so in a live scenario, we can basically put the trees on a, let's say, for example, on a hospital bed and move it into a lift, which obviously you can't do on a drawing, basically. Right? And of course, this is all done in a way that is very intuitive to the stakeholders. Yeah?
And yeah, those sort of examples, I mean, we're going to obviously play that video later, but the one I saw in Europe at the trade show, I think probably about in the last 12 months, what were you trying to do? And can you explain what the poles actually are and what the floor space usually, the size of that is? So when a client comes into, I assume, your showroom, you're basically, you know, there is a sense of projection mapping that is basically being manipulated by the towers. Can you just explain that in more detail about the experience?
Yeah, sure. I think every CADwalk is in theory, and I think your listeners would be very familiar with a motion capture studio. So you have to see CADwalk as a motion capture studio. We basically could repurpose every CADwalk as a motion capture facility. So that means we're using so-called trees on the floor, which have reflective markers. And in real time, we are processing basically then or triangulate basically where the ball is, and by turning and twisting, so we can basically then in real time identify which object we are just moving. And so we're attaching basically a tree to any virtual object, of course. So that gives it a bit more of a tactile environment, which people really like. And so that means the motion capture technology then transfers into the software. And the software is then currently, when we started off, it was a Unix-based system, basically. Now it has been moved to Windows, and we use as a rendering engine, I think we have selected basically Unreal, because we are dealing more in the industrial space, and it seems Unreal is a bit more in favor, but there's no reason, we can't do, and some of the developments have been done in Unity as well, so it's not tied to any of these technologies. And so, yeah, people are going basically with this into then project. So after we motion captured the whole thing, process the 3D, we projecting basically with 4 projectors normally, 3 projectors on the floor, on a around 200 square meter facility. So the floor is relatively wide, and then we have normally like a 60 square meter screen on the wall. So that means we are projecting onto the floor basically a 2D model. On the wall screen, we are projecting a 3D model of the same scene basically. So that means when we are moving the 2D model on the floor, sometimes only with line drawings or orthographic views basically, the 3D model moves automatically on the big screen, and also is pushed out to virtual reality at the same time. So that means there is a very good workflow basically between all of that. So we are not having to re-render or do things. All the rendering, once the model has been generated, is done all in live, is done live basically. So we call it real-time rendering.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's very similar technology, well, similar in the use, but of gaming engines and AR and VR with the film business even. And I know you've sent over an example of how a theme park could actually use this or is using your technology. Can you tell us where that is and how that's come about?
Yes, that was more done from as a demonstration basically for a company in the Middle East. So I can't unfortunately say the name basically, but they tried to use CADwalk basically as for creating better theme parks. And when they saw the whole thing on a conference in Amsterdam, it was obviously that they could use this for a lot of designs basically. I think we had people from around 10 theme parks around the world accidentally popping into the conference because we were there for different purposes. And so yeah, it was quite exciting to see. Again, how adult men become kids basically by playing around with our technology and seeing what benefits they can get out of that basically. Right? And I think, yeah, so the theme park industry is one, of course, there's obviously is the museums and all this sort of things, but the company focus has been really more on commercial projects in healthcare, building and construction, of course. And so we are just in a tendering process with a big organization in Australia to design quite a big hospital. And so the idea is there basically that the doctors and nurses can validate every room before it's being basically built. So that means we suck the model in, and then we go basically with a work group and validate every room basically. So only to give you an idea of the benefits people get out of that, we had the project manager visiting from, I think, the Adelaide Hospital, and that was a hospital built with 5,000 rooms. And the 5,000 rooms, so the guy said if we would have had CADwalk, we would have not saved millions, we would have saved billions in that process. So that means the return on investment, if people start to use our technology, I think they see very quickly that it can save them a lot of time and money, basically.
And that's not only in the construction process, I would imagine, but it's also, when it's being used, right, in real life.
Yeah, of course. So the idea is basically that can be applied to any problem where you want to define space. And we've done basically from hospitals to TV studios, so like, camera sets are, so you can move the cameras, all this sort of things. But they are once-off things basically we are doing. The key focus is really still on our, what we call mission critical rooms basically. So we believe the highest return on investment is where we have people working together with high value assets. So that means, like, let's say in the oil and gas industry, car manufacturing is a big one basically, where they have to make instant decisions, to change the factory outlet basically, and does that result straight away into like a change in how they manufacture. So that means, so they are maybe the highest return on investments. The industries we have identified, or the TAMs, so total available markets basically, for is definitely in factory floor design, building and construction basically, hospitals. And then, of course, then there is a number of other industries, like the entertainment industry, who could benefit from CADwalk as well. So
that's excellent. So tell us about the patents that you've applied for, and I believe you've lodged a patent around this in the local markets there.
Yeah, we have. We started off basically lodging a patent basically, and first of all you go to a patent attorney and you say, oh, we have this crazy idea here, what do you think? So we got a lot of pushback basically, but when he saw this, he said, I think it's not the technology or the software is patentable, but the methodology. So that means the methodology by projecting onto the floor and then moving objects around, that is now already in what we call enforceable in Australia and New Zealand. So the patents have been fully granted, and their patents applied for in Europe, which are 28 countries basically, 27 I think I should say now. I think in the UK, so in the US, I think in Korea and places like that basically as well. India. So that means this is where we have all lodged patents and also trademarks basically. So the CADwalk trademark has been, I think now in 35 countries applied for basically. Yeah. And you need a very good relationship with your patent attorney. So I think that is a very important call basically, and someone who is honest and tells you what is worth to get patented and what not to get patented, what has success. And I think that is a very important part. It costs a hell of a lot of money. So we need, so for every startup company or small company going down the patent way, I think is a very tricky part, basically. Again, the good thing here in Australia is that the under some government scheme, basically, this if you apply for patents overseas, this is covered under what's called an export market development grant. And so that means all our activities, if you go to Germany, to the US or whatever, so we can claim up to 50% basically of our costs back. And that includes patents as well. So which is a fantastic exercise. So because as deeper you go into the patent stuff, as more expensive it gets, basically, of course. You know, so.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's very worthwhile, obviously, to control your market there.
Absolutely, yes.
And how has the COVID issue impacted your industry that you're currently in? Have you seen an uplift of interest? Obviously, it's different for many industries when you look at it, but how's it affected sales and marketing for you guys?
I think it has made it extremely difficult, basically, right? So because people are normally flying, let's say, to Munich from Berlin or something like this. So this is in the moment not happening because of budgets and all this sort of things. So we for the larger CADwalks, basically, we put it sort of in. We have now invented WebEx demonstrations. So that means people can, rather than people flying to us, so we can demonstrate CADwalk basically using what is video conferencing now. And we are just investigating how a 360-degree camera could enhance that experience basically as well. So that means we have still gained a lot of interest basically, but focusing in the moment on Perth and Adelaide as our core markets basically. What we haven't discussed is basically now we are pushing very heavily a thing called CADwalk Mini. So that basically it's the same technology, same software, only it's happening on a much smaller screen. So basically it can be put into any boardroom, any control room. And we see this like the same thing we are doing now with Teams or Zoom or something like this. So that two CADwalks could or we call them CADwalk Minis, could basically communicate over the internet, and you still can have that experience, not in life size, but there's a full interaction basically by having even little 3D printed models, and you can move them around and the other party sees it on the other side. So that means all our R&D and product development activities in the moment go into this so that we can push and release this product pretty quickly actually. So that's sort of our answer to the corona. And I think the bigger CADwalks, I think there is maybe a bit of a holding in the moment. So that means, yes, no, we are affected definitely because we simply can't fly people in, and we can, the distance regulations don't affect us all that much basically. But it has slowed us down definitely in what we call the life size CADwalk. So, but having said that, as a small company, we can turn around and push now heavily the CADwalk Mini solution basically.
Just to finish up on the future of where you're headed and where, the future of design in general. I mean, a lot of architects, do use virtual reality at the office to, critique their spatial awareness and surroundings of the buildings or whatever it might be, right? Are you attracting those sort of clients as well? Or I know you mentioned that, there's potential competition, but, I could see this, being used very widely in that industry and across the whole board, right?
Yeah, I think I see this as a complementary technology. So that means we declare virtual reality, augmented reality, HoloLens 2, whatever, and CADwalk is simply another of these technologies. And I think if we can use all these technologies across the board, that's really what we can do, because the idea would be, and we have shown this model many times basically, that we do the major CADwalk session, let's say with a group of 20 stakeholders, someone has to show me how this is possible in VR, you know, it would be a very difficult task, especially now with the corona, putting glasses on. But then what we have done is basically, we've done this for, I think, Air Services Australia, basically, where key stakeholders did a CADwalk session, but then we have traveling virtual reality kits. So that means the outcome with a laptop and a what is it, a VR kit that was traveling around. I think it was shown to 500 people as well. So of course we can't bring 500 people all the time into CADwalk. So I think it's a combination of CADwalk and virtual reality, and in future the HoloLens basically as well, which gives us a strength basically to do that. So we have a virtual reality department, and I think the good thing for us is we use the same model. So we don't have to rebuild models all the time. So we use one model, we make sure it's compatible with CADwalk, with AR, VR, and I think that's a strength basically of our company.
And are you excited about the smart glasses of the future?
Yes, we are actually, indeed. I think I sent you a little picture actually, only we are working on this, of course. I mean, we're using the HoloLens in the moment. I think after 2 years waiting for the HoloLens, we are quite excited to have this now. And so we've done the first testing in the lab, basically, that on a 200 square meter floor, we see the 2D model on the floor, and then we overlay basically the 3D model and other additional information into, you know, HoloLens or potentially smart glasses basically. And I think that is information you can give to people basically additionally. However, I mean, I'm in that field since 30 or 40 years. As soon as you give people technology in their hands, it fails, you know. So that's maybe where we have to go a long way, but I think the future will give us more robust technology, of course. And what we have experienced is basically, it's a bit maybe on the research side of things, is that CADwalk, because it doesn't use any technology which people have to do, 40 plus people like this very much basically. If you try to put a headset on someone who is 40 or 50 years old, and especially female, there is a lot of resistance, you know, in putting a headset on people and giving them the handsets and all this sort of things. I think both technologies have a good place in the market. And I think we see the younger people, sure, VR and AR and whatever is absolutely no problems. But if you are talking about decision makers, you know, which are normally in the C-level around the 40, 50 mark, sometimes even a bit older, there is a lot of resistance to put glasses on. And I think with smart glasses, we overcome that maybe a bit better, because suddenly we are not in a very enclosed environment anymore. So we are really see the real world and see the virtual world as well, basically, with more information fed to us. So I think, yes, I think a lot of companies are betting on this in the moment, and I think it's a good move, basically, because we want to get people out of the enclosed virtual reality, basically, into, well, it's a mixed reality, isn't it, really?
That's right. And Gerhard, just to finish up, could you let the viewers know how to find you on the internet?
Yeah, I think we are launching a new website. So, but I think you only have to type in CADwalk and don't spell it with T. So it's CAD, of course, for computer aided design, walking through, and CADwalk.global. I think type in CADwalk, and there's many videos on YouTube as well. I think so. Yeah, simply CADwalk.global. So very easy to find.
Fantastic. Hey, and thanks very much for joining us today. You've got an amazing company. I've never quite seen anything like this in, you know, since, particularly in the last 5 years since the industry has reversioned, and it's a great use of the technology and design. So congratulations. We're really happy to have you here.
Brilliant.
But you have a great afternoon in Perth, and I'll speak to you soon.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Matt, for that opportunity.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Cheers. Bye.